Hey guys, welcome to Intro to Motion Graphics, Lab 1, Day 1. Today I'll be introducing you to Adobe After Effects. I'll show you a little bit of the workspace, and we'll do some basic strap keyframing. Let's go ahead and show you what we're going to do today. Just a little 5-second project. This movie uses just basic strap keyframing, scale, transparency, rotation, anchor point, position. So let's go ahead and get started. Open After Effects. Now when you first open After Effects, you're basically going to see what we call a project. And this is just a new project with nothing loaded into it. So let's go ahead and import some assets. If you look in your lab1 folder, I've created a file called designcomp.ai. Let's check that out real quick. It's basically a style frame for the composition and animation we're going to be doing. If you look over here, I've separated everything you see here into layers that we can bring into After Effects for animation. So when in After Effects, go up to the top at File, Import, File, or Command-I if you're into hotkeys. Navigate to the lab1 folder and click on designcomp.ai. Now before you hit open, we need to come down to where it says import as footage. We don't want to bring it in as footage because if we bring it in as footage, it's going to flatten out all those layers into a flat image. We want to retain those layers that I've created, so we want to bring it in as a composition, retain layer sizes. Click composition, retain layer sizes, and click open. Now if you look over here on the left, we have what we call our project window, and this shows you all of the assets that you've brought into After Effects for animation. This one you see at the top is called a composition. Let's double click on that. And you can see when I imported, After Effects automatically made a composition based on the size 1920 by 1080 that I created in Illustrator. If you look over here in the project windows and hit this twirl down in this Design Comp Layers folder, you can see all of the layers that I created in Illustrator have been brought in as well. Now this large window in the middle of your screen is called our composition window. Now in this window, we can preview our animation as well as move stuff around. Now down here is what we call our timeline. The timeline is primarily where we'll be doing most of our animation. You can see a time ruler here that displays how long our composition is, as well as our current time indicator, which serves as a scrubber through our animation. Over here on the left, you can see After Effects has loaded all our layers in. A couple of things we can do with our layers is this little eyeball over here on the left allows us to hide layers. I can hide multiple layers. The next button over is the solo button. If we click on any layer and hit the solo button, it's going to solo that layer. This is good when you have a composition with a lot of assets and you just need to work on one thing. So let's go over strap. Strap is scale, transparency, rotation, anchor point, and position. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look. Click on the Your Name layer, layer 1. If you look on the left, you'll see this little twirl down. Click it, and you'll see a transform property. Hit the twirl down next to that, and you'll see all of our strap values. Anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. Each one of these values also has a corresponding keyframe. So with this layer selected, if I hit S, it'll show me scale. T, it'll show me transparency. R, it'll show me rotation. A, anchor point, and P, position. So let's take a look at scale. Selecting the Your Name layer, hit S on the keyboard. Now in scale, you see two values, the X and the Y value. Right now there's a little link icon next to them that means the proportions are constrained, meaning if I scale either one of these, it's going to scale both the X and the Y together. If I delink them, then I can scale one at a time. If I link them back up, it'll maintain the values that I gave it before, but still scale them together. Hit Command Z to go back. Now hit T on the keyboard for transparency. Under that, we only see one value. It's 100%. And that's how visible our object is. So if we scrub through that, you can see our object disappear. This is great for fading animation in. Let's try R. Hit R on the keyboard, you get rotation. If you scrub through that, you can see your object rotate. Now notice when I rotate down here, if I go all the way to 360, it reverts back to 0 and adds a 1x next to our object. And it'll continually do that. That's basically saying that the object is doing a 360-degree turn however many times. Command Z to go back. A for anchor point. Now the anchor point is a fun one. Right now, as you can see, when I rotate my object, it rotates around this object here on the middle of the layer. Now if I use the pan behind or anchor point tool up here, or Y on the keyboard, I can move my anchor point. Watch what happens when I move it over here. Now when I rotate my object, it rotates in a different spot. It's rotating around our anchor point. And that works with all values. If I scale it, it's going to scale from that anchor point. Command Z back. Now finally, position. Position is just basically our position on the X and the Y. So I can move it on the X horizontally or the Y vertically. Now everything that I just showed you is keyframeable. If I click on your name, let's center this up a little bit better. And click on S for scale. What we're going to do is we're going to click this little stopwatch icon. When you click that stopwatch icon, when you look down here on your timeline, you can see this little diamond shaped icon. That's called a keyframe. Whenever the time indicator goes over a keyframe, it's going to display whatever value you've given that keyframe. So our first keyframe on the Your Name layer, let's go ahead and take it down to 0. You can scrub like this, or you can just click and type 0. And since they're constrained, both the X and the Y will go to 0. Now let's go up to keyframe number 5. Let's take it up to 100%. Cool, we've just created an animation. If you go up here to the preview window and hit this button on the far left called RAM Preview, it'll preview our animation. Also, hitting 0 on your keyboard also previews the animation. Now, this is taking a little while for me to preview. Because my time indicator is going through the entire 5 seconds of our animation. I only want to see like the first second. So what I'm going to do is come down here to the end of our timeline, and we have this work area end tab. I'm going to click that and I'm going to drag that down to the 1 second mark. So now when I RAM preview, 0 on the keyboard, it's only going to display that part of the animation. Now I like what we got so far, but I think we could make it a little bit better using something called an animation principle. Now this animation principle that we're going to use is called follow through. Basically it means we're going to give the animation physics. For example, instead of our layer going from 0 to 100 over 5 frames, let's take our layer from 0 to 110. Now let's go out 5 frames and take it down to 90. So now it looks like our layer pops out, but it's got so much momentum, it's popping back in. Looks a lot better. We're not quite done yet though. If I come forward another 5 frames to frame 15, and we'll put our layer at 100 to kind of give it its final resting place. RAM preview that. Now you can see our layer has follow through. Now this is pretty good. We're almost there. What we need to do now is space out our keyframes a little bit, because as this animation plays through, it should be losing momentum. So if I take highlight these two keys here at the end, and we're going to move it forward one. So now it's 6 frames between when it pops at 110 to where it goes to 90. Take this one here down at the end and move it forward 2 more frames. So now you can see we have this nice space that increases with each keyframe, basically because is losing momentum. In preview, now I really like the way that looks. Let's do the same thing to the bar behind it. So click on the layer 1, so click on layer 2, banner middle, and hit S for scale. Same thing, we're going to start out at frame 0. Hit the stopwatch, move forward 5 frames, take it to 110, move forward 6 frames, move it to 90, and then to finish out, move forward 7 frames and take it to its resting place at 100. Now when you RAM preview and hit spacebar, our banner should be going with our name layer. Now real quick, since this is an Illustrator file, we can go ahead and change the your name text to whatever we want to. So go down to Illustrator, in your lab1 folder, open the designcomp.ai, and go ahead and go on the your name layer and type in your name. Now this works much like assets in InDesign. If we change anything that we imported into After Effects, it's going to update it and change it in After Effects. Let me turn this out a little bit. Hit Command S to save it. We go back into After Effects. Click on any one of our layers and hit Reload Footage. And you'll see that whenever it reloaded our Illustrator file, it checked all the layers and it reloaded the one with our name on it. So now if you ran preview, you can see your name bouncing. Alright, let's do a little bit more scale. Let's go to layer 3, the teal arrow right, and hit S on the keyboard for scale. Now this one we're going to do a little differently. There's a couple things we have to do to kind of facilitate this. If I scale right now, it's going to scale on the anchor point in the middle. And I don't like the way that looks. You know, that could be pretty cool. I don't know. Let's put it back at 100% where it was, and let's take our anchor point, or pan behind tool, anchor point tool, or Y on the keyboard, and move our anchor point to the edge. So now when we scale, it's going to go down from our anchor point, and that looks pretty good. I like the way that looks, but I don't like how it's scaling both the X and the Y at the same time. So let's take this little link down here, the constrained proportions link, and let's just try scaling it on the X. So let's bring it down to 0, hit a keyframe, move forward to frame 5, and take it to 100. Hit 0 on the keyboard to preview. Now that looks pretty good, but how about we do the same squash and stretch animation principles that we applied to the first animation. Let's go forward to 6 frames. So instead of 100, let's make that first keyframe 110. Move forward 6 frames, move it to 90, and then move forward 7 frames and put it at 100. Let's take a look. Now it looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and do the other arrow. So click on layer 4 and hit S on the keyboard. Same thing, we need to grab our anchor point tool, the pan behind tool, Y on the keyboard, put our anchor point at the edge. We're going to go to frame 0, hit the stopwatch, unconstrain our proportions, and scale down to 0 on our X. Move up to frame 5, take her to 110, move up to frame 6, take her to 90, then go up to frame 7 and take her to 100. Now I'm liking the way that looks. Let's do our gears in the background using scale as well. Let's highlight both of our gears by holding Shift on the keyboard. If we hit S, it'll twirl down the scale value for both of them. Now here's something cool about keyframes. We can actually copy the keyframes from our name tag layer that we did earlier. If we just drag a box around them on the timeline, highlight them and hit Command C, come down here selecting both of these layers, both of the orange circle layers, go to frame 0 and hit paste, Command V, and it's actually going to copy those same values that we gave to our name tag onto the gear layers. Now that looks pretty cool, but I think right now we should start doing another animation principle called overlapping animation. So instead of everything happening at the exact same time, we should give everything a little bit of an overlap. For instance, our outer gear circle should be the first thing that happens, followed by our inner gear circle. So if we take layer 5, our orange inner circle gear, and just bring it down, say about 4 frames. If you look, they're now happening at different times. And it's a lot more visually appealing. Let's do the same thing with our name tag. Let's take layer 2 and layer 1, holding shift on the keyboard, and drag them down to frame 5. Hit 0, RAM preview. I'm really starting to like that, the way that looks. So let's do some position. I have these 3 lines here in the middle, layers 7, 8, and 9. Let's do all 3 of those layers. So hold shift and select all 3 of those layers. And hit P on the keyboard to bring open your position value. Now sometimes I like to animate backwards because it can be a lot easier for certain things. This would be a great example. Move forward to frame 5 and set stopwatch. Now move back to frame 0. And if you click and use the position, you can actually see them moving off screen. If you click and drag, you can actually see the animation's trajectory. Since we've already set this keyframe in the middle, the new keyframe that we're creating has somewhere to go. So if I drag these over here and let go, you can see they're animating to the keyframe that we first set. I like that, but I think we can do a lot cooler. Let's drag them up here. And we can sort of see where we can line them up so they come down in a straight line. If we just line up the bounding boxes with the trajectory, we can get them coming in at a straight angle. So now when we take a look at it, RAM preview, we can see it coming down into the animation. So that's pretty cool, but I think our lines should come from different places. Maybe change the animation up a little bit. I think line middle is good coming from the top, but let's take line top and line bottom and have them come from the bottom. To do that, hold command to select layer 7 and layer 9 at the same time. It's kind of like holding shift, but it allows you to skip layers and be selective when selecting layers. And if we go over our keyframe on number 5, we can just take those two. And if we go to frame 0, instead of having them come from the top, we bring them down here to the bottom. So now when we preview our animation, we have one coming from the top and the other 2 coming from the bottom. Now it's looking pretty good, but I think we can use our animation principles to add some follow through to this as well. So first, let's take the one in the middle and do that. So on frame 5, instead of having it settle right there in the middle, let's take it and drag it down so it goes a little bit too far. Then we'll come forward 6 frames, much like we did the scale earlier, and bring it back just a little too far. And then we'll go ahead 7 frames, and then we'll let her settle out in the middle. And then we'll let it set it out. And then we'll let it settle in the middle. Let's take a look real quick. It's starting to get pretty cool. So let's take holding command, select layer 7 line top and layer 9 line bottom. Move forward to frame 6. Instead of having move to frame 5, and we'll do the same thing. These two move up a little bit too far. Move forward 6 frames, then have them move down a little bit too far. And then move forward 7 frames and have them settle in the middle. So now if we preview, you can see we've added a little bit of follow through to our animation and it looks way better. Now I know a way we can make it even more sophisticated. Now I know a way we can even make it better. Let's overlap these lines kind of like we did with the gears earlier. I think the middle one should come first, but I think the top and the bottom ones could come a little bit later. Let's take layer 7, the top layer, and move it forward like 3 frames, so it doesn't start until frame 3. Let's take the line bottom layer and move it forward 4 frames. So now if we preview, they're all coming at different times. Now if we preview, they're all coming at different times. So it looks like we only have 1 layer left to animate. Let's go to our outer ring. And for this one, I think we can do scale again. But I think we can go a little bit different than the scales we've done before. Instead of it having it scale from 0, let's have it scale from real big. So we'll hit S on the keyboard to open our scale. Let's go up to frame 5 and set our keyframe. And then go back to frame 0 and scale our object up till it goes out of the screen, like 200%. Now when we preview, we can see our ring coming in from the sides. That's pretty good, but I think it's time we use a little rotation. So if we hit R on our keyboard and then hit the stopwatch on frame 0 for rotation, move forward to frame 5, and let's just spin it to 90 degrees. I kind of like the way that looks. So let's preview that. It's happening a little too fast for us to see. Let's take that rotation out and have it happen over 15 frames instead of 5 frames. So now hopefully we can see it better. Yeah, I like that. Okay, let's add some rotation to our gears too. Gears should turn. So let's grab our orange circles, inner and outer, frame 5 and frame 6. And if you hold shift and hit R on the keyboard, it not only keeps our scale open from before, but then it also opens rotation. And this works with any strap value. So let's go ahead, and for this one, I think I want it to rotate for the entire length of our timeline. So go to frame 0, hit the stopwatch to add rotation on both layers. And if we let's take our work area and bring it all the way back out to 5 seconds. Let's go to the very end. Let's have our gears rotate 180 degrees. Now I like that. That looks pretty cool. But I think they should go in opposite directions. So let's pick one. So let's take the back layer, layer number 6, the orange outer circle. Instead of 180 degrees positive, let's take it minus 180 degrees. So essentially it's going to rotate in the other direction. So you can see we're getting a little bit of parallax. RAM preview on your keyboard. That looks pretty cool. That looks pretty cool. We're almost done. But there's one strap value we haven't used yet. Transparency. And I think I know a cool way we can use transparency in this animation. It's something you'll do for a lot of your animations. We need a fade in. So I don't really have an asset I can use for that. So let's create one. If I go to the top here and go to Layer, and then New, and then Solid, or Command Y on your keyboard. If we click on that, we get a little dialog that pops up asking how big we want our solid, what color it should be. If it's not defaulted to black on yours, click on it and bring it to 0060 black and bring it to 60 black. Hit OK, and we have a black solid. We'll get more into solids later, but for now we're just going to use transparency on it. So go to frame 0 on your black solid layer. Let's hit enter on the layer to change the name, and we'll call it fade. Now hit T on the layer so you bring up your opacity and hit the stopwatch. Now let's go to frame 15. Most fades seem to be 15 frames long, and we'll scrub it down to 0. So now when I preview, you can see our animation fades in from black. Pretty cool. Now, what if we want our animation to fade out? When it gets to 5 seconds. What we can do is we can take these two keyframes. So what if we want our animation to fade out? Well, we can come down here to frame 15. We can set another keyframe for 0. So we come down here to frame 4 minutes 15 seconds. Create another keyframe for 0. Come all the way out to 5 minutes. Come all the way out to 5 minutes. Bring it to 100%. And now our animation should fade in and fade out. But what if we had something more complex? Like we wanted our scale animations to scale out, for instance. Well, here's another trick. Well, here's another cool thing that After Effects can do. If we select the keyframes on your name for scale and hit Command C to copy them, come down here near the end to like 4 seconds and hit Command V for paste. If we right click with those keyframes highlighted, go down to Keyframe Assistant, there's a thing at the bottom called Time Reverse Keyframes, and this basically reverses your keyframes. So let's click that, and now when we preview it, you can see our name actually scales out before it leaves. And it's cool because of the follow-through animation we added. It looks like it's anticipating the fact that it's leaving. It scales in, scales up, and then vamoose. So let's do that for our banner middle layer. Go ahead and highlight those keys, Command C, Command V, and then right click, Time Reverse Keyframes. And now our banner should do the same thing. So let's go ahead and do that to the rest of our layers. If we grab our teal, do teal arrow right, Command C, Command V while the time indicator is at 4 seconds. Right click, time reverse. Same thing with our teal arrow left. Right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse. Our orange circle layer, our orange inner. Our orange inner layer. Now we don't want to grab the rotation because the rotation's fine. So we're just grabbing the scale on our cogs, on our gears. Time reverse our lines. And finally, for our outer ring, it looks like I only have rotation open, but I know a cool hotkey that we can use to bring up our scale. If we hit U on the keyframe, if we hit U on the keyboard, it will show us if we highlight layer 11 and hit U on the keyboard, it will show us all keyframes applied for that layer. So for this one, we don't want to take the scale and the rotation. Command C, keyframe assistant, and time reverse those keyframes. And I think that's everything. Time reverse our keyframe bottom. Come down to the outer ring, make sure you have scale selected on the keyboard, Command C. Right click, time reverse keyframes. Come down to our outer ring layer, and I know we only have rotation open, but I know we have scale open too. But here's a good chance to show you guys another really helpful key. If we have a layer closed and we have animation on it, if we click on that layer and hit U on the keyboard, it'll show us all keyframes we have on that layer no matter what they are. This is extremely helpful and I use it almost every day. So if we highlight both our scale and rotation keyframes, Command C, come down to 4 seconds, Command V to paste, right click, time reverse those keyframes, and I think that's it. Little tweaks we could do is a lot of our animation happens over our fade. So if we select all of our keyframes by highlighting every single keyframe in our composition and slide them down to so they start at frame 5, now they won't start till after a lot of our fade has already happened. And one last thing. Most projects need a vignette. Just something to add a little bit more variation to the color. You see how this is really flat looking? Well, fortunately, I've created one. So if we go up to File, Import, File, Command I on your keyboard, I have a vignette.psd in the lab1 folder. Go ahead and click on that. And we can leave this one as footage because it's not really separated into layers that I need. Hit open, hit OK in the dialog that pops up, and now we have this pre-comp that was brought in that's just called vignette. So if I go back to my design comp layer and I take this vignette, so go up to File, Import, File, Command I on the keyboard, I have a vignette.psd. And we can just bring that one in as footage because it's not separated into layers. Hit open, and where it says import kind composition, go ahead and switch that to footage. And you can see that we just have a PSD file in our project window. Let's go ahead and drag that down to the top and take a look at our animation now. Now you can see it has a real nice variation in the color. It's cool because the vignette kind of leads you into the middle where your name is. Well guys, that's the end of the day 1 tutorial. I hope you got a lot out of it. Feel free to go ahead and play with this animation some more. There's a zillion different ways you can animate these objects on screen. You can also go into the Illustrator document, change the font, or change the... And congratulations on completing your first step to become an animator.